In a world ruled by power and privilege, the Sovereign Marksman Club stood as the playground of the untouchable elite Grant Whitmore national champion, golden boy of precision. Shooting had never imagined his reign would be challenged. Until Claire Dawson walked in, a woman with steady hands and a promise made to a fallen soldier. Master Chief Ethan the Phantom, Dawson mocked, underestimated, pushed into a rigged game where the rules were never meant to favor her. But with unwavering resolve and a skill set honed in the quiet shadows of real sacrifice, Claire took aim not just at the target, but at the arrogance that thought it could break her. When her final shot echoed through the hall, the world stood still. And it wasn't just one man's pride that fell. It was an entire illusion of invincibility, the Phantom's legacy. A story of promises kept, courage reclaimed, and strength born from silence. The sharp crack of a perfect shot rang through the Sovereign Marksman Club, slicing through the hushed luxury like a whip. A second later, thunderous applause erupted from the wealthy patrons, all clad in designer shooting vests and monogrammed gloves. Grant Whitmore lowered his custom Blazer R8 rifle, a smug grin spreading across his sun-kissed face as the screen flashed another bullseye. This was his arena, a kingdom where money, lineage, and skill merged into an unbreakable shield against the outside world. If you've ever been underestimated or made to feel invisible, you might want to stay. What happened next would change everything. At the marble-floored entrance of America's most prestigious shooting club, Claire Dawson paused, clutching a worn leather purse. Her gray cardigan and scuffed sneakers made her look painfully out of place, like a dandelion in a garden of imported roses. At 30, Claire was neither dazzling enough to turn heads nor privileged enough to command attention. The receptionist, flawless in appearance and frosty in demeanor, barely lifted her eyes. "Membership cards only," she said smoothly. When Claire approached, Claire exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I have a guest pass," she said, pulling out a crumpled envelope. Across the lounge, Grant Whitmore caught sight of her the way a shark scents a ripple. At 42, Grant stood at the peak of his fame, five-time national champion, Olympic gold medalist, poster boy for Sovereign Arms. He smirked, his voice carrying across the room like a shot. "Someone get the poor girl directions to the nearest flea market." Laughter rippled around him, smooth and cruel. Claire said nothing, simply made her way toward the basic range. Natalie Brooks, the club's manager and a former champion herself, frowned at Grant's mockery but held her tongue. At the farthest lane, Claire unpacked a small cloth bundle, inside a standard Glock 19. Serviceable, unremarkable worlds, apart from the custom pieces gleaming elsewhere. Grant and his entourage drifted closer, sensing easy amusement. $5,000 says she can't even nick the paper. One joked, Grant chuckled. "Make it 30,000, I'll bet she's never even held a real gun." He sauntered up to her, fake politeness dripping from his every word. "Excuse me, ma'am. Sure you're in the right place. This isn't a pottery class." Claire lifted her gaze, her hazel eyes steady and unblinking. "I'm just here to practice." Grant grinned wolfishly. "Practice, huh? Tell you what, hit the bullseye at 40 yards, and I'll personally cover your shooting fees. Miss it, and you walk away." Claire hesitated, twisting the simple gold band on her left hand. "All right," she said softly. Grant's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise before his smirk returned. "Excellent, ladies and gentlemen, the entertainment has arrived." No one noticed the way Claire's stance shifted, the way her spine straightened, her grip locked, her breathing slowed. No one recognized the ghostly echoes of training, so ingrained it had become instinct. No one now knew that the ring she wore once belonged to Ethan Dawson, the Phantom SEAL Team 6's most revered sniper. 3 years earlier, Claire had stood under a heavy gray sky at Arlington National Cemetery, the folded flag nearly slipping from her numb fingers. Master Chief Ethan Dawson had served his country with silent brilliance, building a legend so profound it could only be whispered among the teams. Officially, he died in a helicopter crash during a classified mission, but Claire knew better. Some truths would never reach daylight. Their love had bloomed in unlikely places. A chance meeting in Burlington, a whirlwind marriage, countless days stolen between deployments, and long afternoons at the range where Ethan had taught her everything he knew. With patient hands and a gentle voice. "You've got steady hands, Claire," he would say, tracing the line of her wrist. "And a calm that can't be taught, trust that." When he was home, they shot together. When he was gone, she waited, clutching the memory of his voice. Before his last mission, Ethan had asked her for one thing. Promise me you'll keep practicing even when I'm not here. For years after his death, she couldn't touch a weapon, until 1 week ago when a package arrived, a day pass to Sovereign Marksman Club, and a handwritten note from Logan Price, Ethan's old teammate. 3 years is long enough, Claire. Come back to the living. Now standing under the fluorescent lights with Grant's laughter echoing in the background, Claire felt the dormant part of herself awaken. She raised the Glock, steadied her breath, and fired. The crack of the shot echoed cleanly. The target reeled back. Dead center bullseye, gas rippled through the gallery. Grant's grin faltered as Claire calmly lowered the weapon. Beginner's luck, he barked too loudly. Natalie Brooks approached her, mask of professionalism, slipping into admiration. That was an exceptional shot, miss. Claire Dawson, she said quietly. Before Natalie could invite Claire to the advanced range, Grant interjected. Hold on. One lucky shot doesn't prove anything. I say we make it interesting. The crowd hushed, sensing the shift. $30,000, Grant announced. 3 bullseyes at 60 yards. Miss one it and you leave Sovereign for good. Claire considered walking away, but then she thought of Ethan, of Logan, of every promise she had made. She met Grant's gaze head on. If I win, she said quietly, the money goes to the Valor Foundation for injured veterans. Grant hesitated, then smirked. Fine, it's your funeral. Claire Dawson calmly stepped up to the firing line, ignoring the growing murmur of the onlookers. She could feel Grant Whitmore's smug stare drilling into her back, but it barely registered. All she felt was the weight of the promise she had made years ago, the echo of Ethan's hand steadying her shoulder. The rangemaster called for silence. Claire inhaled slowly, aligned her stance, exhaled halfway, and fired. The first shot cracked through the air. Dead center, Grant's confident smirk faltered slightly. Claire reloaded without a word. Second shot bullseye again. The tension in the room thickened. Whispers broke out among the audience. Some of Grant's friends shifted uneasily. Claire adjusted her grip slightly for the final shot. She twisted her wedding ring, once a small, private ritual, then squeezed the trigger. The final bullet slammed into the exact center of the target. 3 perfect bullseyes. A stunned silence gripped the room. Then a scattering of applause began. Hesitant at first, then swelling, overtaking the shocked hush. Natalie Brooks hurried to verify the targets, her face betraying open admiration. All 3 confirmed, she announced clearly. Grant's jaw tightened visibly. He snatched the targets from Natalie, inspecting them desperately, looking for any imperfection. There was none. You got lucky, he muttered under his breath, but even he didn't sound convinced. Claire returned to her lane, her face calm, her heartbeat steady. Inside a small ember of pride warmed her chest. She had kept her promise. Of course, Grant Whitmore wasn't about to let it end there. Before the crowd dispersed, he raised his voice. Since luck seems to be on Miss Dawson's side today, he called out, forcing a smile, let's give Boston a real show. He pulled out a crisp, pre-prepared document, a formal challenge, one-on-one competition, 8 stations, 8 different firearms, all equipment provided by Sovereign Marksman, winner takes all, and the honor. The crowd buzzed with excitement, cameras flashed, local reporters began whispering into phones. Claire's hazel eyes narrowed. She had no doubt the equipment provided would not be entirely neutral. Natalie approached her quietly. Claire, she said urgently, be careful. There's talk the setup might not exactly be fair. Claire smiled faintly. I expected nothing less. Facing Grant across the wide marble floor, she said simply, I accept. Grant's answering smile was thin and predatory. Good 1 week from today. Bring your best. At the Whitmore penthouse, Grant stood alone in his glass-walled study, swirling a glass of bourbon. The city lights blurred beyond the windows, but he saw none of it. Across the room, Vanessa Reed, his girlfriend, scrolled nervously through her phone. They're calling her the unknown marksman, Vanessa said softly. Her shots are all over social media. Everyone's talking about her. Some reporters are saying it wasn't luck. Grant downed the bourbon in one gulp. One day doesn't make a legend, he snapped. Just then his phone buzzed. His private investigator, Grant, snatched it up. Tell me you found something. The voice on the other end was grim. Grant Claire Dawson is the widow of Master Chief Ethan Dawson. Grant froze. Ethan Dawson. His voice was barely a whisper. The Phantom. The investigator confirmed. Legendary SEAL Team 6 sniper. Unofficial long-range records. Tactical Ghost died 3 years ago in a classified op. Grant's hand tightened around the glass and toasted cracked. Are you telling me I picked a fight with a sniper's protege? He ground out. The investigator didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said, from what we've gathered, Ethan trained her seriously. Some say she was a natural. Grant ended the call without another word. He stood there breathing heavily, the truth crashing over him. Claire Dawson wasn't some nobody. She was the living extension of a ghost. Across town, Claire sat at her modest kitchen table, a battered notebook spread open before her. Ethan's notes, windage distance adjustments, breathing patterns. His handwriting was steady and sure, just like he had been. Her phone buzzed. Logan Price's name lit up the screen. She answered immediately. You could have told me earlier, Logan grumbled on the other end, his voice rough but affectionate. You were always stubborn. I had to do this my way, Claire said simply. There was a pause. You're not alone, Claire, Logan said finally. We've got your back. The next morning, Claire drove an hour outside the city to a private range. Waiting there was a tall man in civilian clothes but unmistakable military bearing. Commander Harris, Ethan's old teammate. Mrs. Dawson, he said respectfully. Heard you could use some range time. Claire smiled faintly. Claire's fine, Commander. For the next 6 hours, they worked dialing in Claire's skills with long-range precision rifles, especially the Barrett MRAD she knew would appear at the final station. Commander Harris was direct but encouraging. Ethan always said you had the steadiest hands he'd ever seen outside the teams, Harris told her, watching as she drilled tight groups at 600 yards. This isn't about speed or flash, he reminded her. It's about control, focus, adaptation. As the sun dipped behind the tree line, Claire packed away the rifle and turned to Harris. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. Harris's face softened. When you lose a brother, he said simply, you take care of what mattered to him. He handed her a small, worn notebook. These were Ethan's personal win calculations. You'll need them tomorrow. Claire accepted the gift reverently, her heart swelling with emotion she couldn't name. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Grant brooded. He knew now he wasn't just fighting Claire. He was fighting Ethan's legacy, but pride, anger, and fear kept him moving. This doesn't change anything, he muttered aloud, ignoring Vanessa's worried glance. Experience wins over sentiment. Still late that night, he made a final phone call to an old contact. Make sure everything is set, he said coldly. No surprises. Because Grant Whitmore might have realized the ghost he was facing, but he still believed money and influence could buy any outcome. Even against a phantom, the Sovereign Marksman Club had never seen such a crowd. Word had spread fast. Reporters, veterans, and shooting enthusiasts gathered around the custom-built competition arena, which gleamed under carefully arranged lights. Banners bearing Grant Whitmore's logo fluttered proudly in the spring breeze. But today there was a second name murmured on every lip, Claire Dawson. Inside, Natalie Brooks moved briskly through the final checks. She frowned as she examined the competition firearms. Some triggers felt heavier than standard. Some scopes were slightly off, small adjustments enough to rattle someone unfamiliar. Natalie couldn't officially object, but she found Claire before the match. Be cautious, she whispered urgently. There are inconsistencies. Claire smiled with a quiet calm. Thank you, Natalie, I'll adapt. Grant arrived surrounded by his entourage sponsors and media representatives. His designer shooting gear practically screamed confidence. Approaching Claire at the staging area, he offered a shark-like smile. Miss Dawson, he said smoothly, I hope you slept well. There was a hard glint in his eyes now. He wasn't just trying to win. He wanted to humiliate. Claire met his gaze steadily. My husband taught me about performing under pressure. She said, her voice steady. I'll manage. Grant's smile faltered just for a moment. The competition began with ceremony. 8 stations, 8 firearms. Increasing difficulty. Each station's score would accumulate, but the final station with the Barrett MRAD at extreme distance was weighted most heavily. Grant's strategy was simple. Build a lead early and rely on the sabotaged equipment to break Claire's rhythm. At the first station, Grant shot flawlessly, quick, flashy, showy. The crowd cheered Claire's turn. Her movements were precise, economic without drama. She wasted no energy. She didn't chase applause. Her bullets hit true. Station after station, the pattern held. Grant dazzled with flair. Claire moved like water, silent, unstoppable. By the halfway mark, Grant held a slight lead, but not the crushing dominance he expected. He grew more agitated with each passing station. At the fifth station, Claire encountered the first deliberate sabotage, a 6-hour P-226 with an unusually heavy trigger pull. She felt it instantly, but she remembered Ethan's voice. Conditions change, adapt. She shifted her stance, adjusted her pull, and still landed a near-perfect grouping. By the seventh station, the lead had all but vanished. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The veterans, the real shooters, began to nod and murmur approval. Logan Price, seated quietly among the back rows with other SEAL veterans, allowed himself a small smile. "You're doing it, Claire," he muttered under his breath. At the eighth station, Grant barely maintained his edge. The scores were almost dead even. Everything would come down to the final challenge. The Barrett MR8 at 800 yards. The air was electric as the two finalists approached their firing positions. Grant fired first. His sequence was impressive, 9 out of 10 within the bullseye ring. The crowd roared approval. He turned away, already composing his victory speech in his mind. Claire stepped up. The Barrett felt wrong the moment she laid hands on it. The stock was misaligned. The scope, a fraction out of true. She closed her eyes briefly, opened Ethan's notebook, adjusted everything by feel and instinct. Trust your training, trust your breath. She fired. The first shot hit dead center. So did the second. And the third. The crowd leaned forward collectively, barely breathing. At the sixth shot, just as Claire exhaled, a sudden, deliberate flash of light caught her peripheral vision. A reflection from a polished belt buckle near Grant's entourage. An attempt to distract Claire didn't flinch. She refocused, slowed her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. Bullseye one by one, her shots carved perfect holes into the target. By the final shot, the arena was silent, a cathedral of tension. Claire fired the last round with mechanical grace. Target retrieval whirred and clicked unbearably slow. When it reached the judges, there was no question. 10 shots, 10 bullseyes. The scoreboard flashed, Claire Dawson champion. A beat of stunned silence. Then the stands erupted. Applause, cheers, veterans saluting. Even some of Grant's former supporters stood and clapped. Grant's face twisted in fury and disbelief. He stormed forward, hand extended stiffly. Claire took it briefly, her grip firm. "This isn't over," Grant hissed under his breath. Claire met his eyes, steady, unshaken. "For today," she said calmly, "it is. And you owe $30,000 to the Valor Foundation." Before Grant could retreat fully from the stage, Natalie Brooks stepped forward, a tablet in hand. "Mr. Whitmore," she said crisply, her voice amplified by the arena speakers. "Before you leave, there's one more matter." She tapped the screen. The jumbo display behind them flickered, then lit up with security footage. The audience gasped. The footage showed two of Grant's technicians, easily identifiable in Sovereign Club uniforms, tampering with the firearms the night before the competition. Adjusting triggers, misaligning scopes, sabotaging the equipment Claire had used. But not Grant's. Gasps of outrage echoed through the crowd. Senator Peterson, standing among the VIPs, shook his head in visible disgust. "This competition," Natalie continued firmly, "was monitored under Sovereign Marksman's bylaws, and we take the integrity of our events very seriously." She turned to Grant. "You are hereby disqualified, permanently banned from Sovereign Marksman Club. An internal investigation has already been forwarded to local authorities." Two uniformed officers approached the stage. "Grant Whitmore," one said formally, "we need you to come with us to answer questions regarding criminal tampering and violations of gaming laws." Grant's carefully built world collapsed in a heartbeat. His sponsors vanished within hours. His trophies, symbols of his prestige, now reminders of his disgrace. Meanwhile, Claire quietly packed up her Glock and Ethan's notebook. Logan Price and several other veterans gathered around her, offering silent nods of respect. Claire hadn't just defeated a champion. She had exposed a fraud and honored a promise. 3 days later, Claire sat across from Colonel Harris, director of the Valor Foundation. "You've done more than win a competition," Harris said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You've inspired something real." He slid a folder across the desk. "We're launching a new program, Marksmanship Therapy for Veterans. We'd be honored if you'd lead it." Claire hesitated, emotion tightening her throat. "I'm not a soldier," she said. Harris smiled. "No, you're something just as rare. You understand what it means to stand your ground under fire, literally and figuratively." Claire glanced down at the folder, Valor Marksmanship Program, in bold letters underneath, "In honor of Master Chief Ethan Phantom Dawson." Her fingers brushed over the words. She didn't need time to decide. "I accept," she said quietly. Meanwhile, Grant's legal team scrambled for damage control. He issued a hollow public apology, paid double the promised $30,000 to Valor Foundation, and retreated into self-imposed exile. His legacy shattered. 6 months later, the Valor Foundation's new training center opened its doors. Claire stood at the front of a group of veterans, some missing limbs, some carrying wounds invisible to the eye. "Good morning," she said, her voice strong and steady. "My name is Claire Dawson. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a champion. I'm someone who learned that sometimes the steadiest hands belong to those who have survived the greatest shaking." She paused, letting the silence settle warmly over the room. "Today we start not just learning to shoot, but to trust again, to breathe again, to live again." At the dedication ceremony, the Valor Foundation announced the inaugural Ethan Phantom Dawson Scholarship for Excellence in Marksmanship, awarded annually to a veteran, demonstrating outstanding resilience standing by the plaque. Claire twisted her wedding ring one last time, a quiet private gesture. "This one's for you, Ethan." And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about defeating the ones who doubted you. It was about becoming the person you were always meant to be. The quiet ones, the steady ones, the unstoppable ones.